Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. James here as ever for today's really important video going through the External Examiner's Report for the Audit and Assurance AA or F8 examination for July 2020. If you're new to this channel, my name is James. I'm an ACCA qualified member and my channel is set up so it helps ACCA students around the world pass their upcoming exams, and it's 100% student led. So today's video, well, listening out there, hopefully, Martin, as you can see, look, I've got your query, I've taken it down. This video is dedicated to you. I really hope it helps with your upcoming examination. Also, I mean, Savin, I've not forgotten about you. Look at this, look at the edit there. It's all up there for you. And of course, Ray, I've not forgotten about you. Drop me messages on Instagram with videos you really need help on as well. All of my details are in the description to this video below. I've also put down there some of the books that I'd recommend that you could actually use in your revision, or of the up-to-date ones that I get queries on about all the time. The links to actually buy the correct ones down there, and they are the right years as well, which is really important because standards matter in this examination. So, I'm going to take you through, as I said, the External Examiner's Report, head to toe, all of my notes, so make sure you've got a pen and paper, or if you're listening away with this in your earphones as well, I really hope it helps you through, because when I sat this examination, I did pass it first time. I got a mid-50 score, I think it's 54 in the end, but the key thing that really struck me was how much detail you had to go into, plus I had very, very little audit experience at the time as well. So this is the key thing as to, I want to transpire all of my knowledge over to you. These are the points that I really wish I'd have known when I was either first starting out in the audit and assurance paper, or if you've actually failed the exam before, do not panic. I've also got another video on my channel of the 5 top tips as to how to pass the audit and assurance examination. So watch this one through, get all your notes, then go over and check that one out with all the other free study tips as well. If you are new to the channel, feel free to subscribe so that you get access to all of my materials, and whenever I upload a video, you'll get first dibs on it. It's alright. But without any further ado, I think let's get stuck into this. If you've got any questions as we go through, put them in the comments below. And as you can see from the length of this video, there are tons of notes, so feel free to give it a massive like so that more ACCA students will benefit from it as well. But without any further ado, I'm excited. Let's get kicked off on this on 3, 2, 1, and go. Right, on to some serious stuff now then, and this is all designed to help you out. So the first main thing is, the video is going to be quite long. There is a lot of material to go through on this. I'd highly recommend put it in your actual revision notes as to come back and watch this video again to go over some of the actual fundamental points. There are so many things that I've gone through here. You've got access to all of my notes. Make the most of them as well. I'd have really liked to have had these when I was a student doing the audit and assurance paper. The second thing is you can actually access this document for free. So what I've done is I'll put it in the description to this video below. Go onto the link, it's free on the ACCA's website, check it out, and then you get all of my notes as well from it as well that you can add your own to on top of mine, and I think that is going to put you in such good stead going into your examination. So, I can see you looking at the screen as well. We've got the External Examiner's Report. I'm nice and hunky-dory at the bottom here as well, but, you know, not really here to sort of see me for this. There is more value in the actual paper itself, but I can hear you saying to me, James, that is a lot of information. We've got lots of things to go through here as you scroll through. This doesn't look very appealing. Where's all this magic or added value or your expertise in all of this? Whew. Don't you worry about this. I got you. Don't worry. Ready, okay. Whoa, there we go. Now we're ready to rock and roll. Okay, so pen and paper at the ready. You've got this hopefully loaded up on your computer screen as well, or if not, just take it down, take in the notes as whatever you may be doing. If you've got it on your headphones as well, it's all designed to help you out with really key points I really wish I'd have known as well. But I'm just going to walk and talk you through exactly what I thought when I read the External Examiner's Report from my perspective as a tutor now, and what I wish I'd have known as a student. So get comfy. I'm looking forward to this as well. Plenty of proper stuff to go through. So let's rock and roll and start to have a look through. So, first of all, you've got my notes as we go through here, so feel free to pause this video, whatever's going to work best for you. I'm just going to walk and talk it through exactly what I thought when I was reading through it. What information did I think was absolutely critical in my external examiner's report analysis? Well, the first things first on here, the pass rate for this examination. I get tons of queries on this, and give or take it's around 40%. So in other words, for every 10 students that turn up to the exam, only 4 are going to pass, and that's on a good sitting as well. I've seen it as low as 33% or 35%, so 1 in 3 pass it. So there are so many notes as we go through here. You've got the top 5 tips in my other video, as I said. Make the most of it, and again, in the description as we go through, put any questions you've got for this topic or any others as well. But the external examiners team, for the 40% that do pass, tell us what the actual strengths were, the weaknesses, and one of my favourite terms as well as to constructive advice. I mean, yes, for future candidates like yourself, what should be known? Well, from a student that spent hours and weekends and evenings and mornings and any time of the day, this is the fundamental things you need to be getting down on here. So we're coming on to the general comments to kick us off. First of all, we actually have that the exam is 3 hours and 50 minutes of reading and sort of analysis time. So if you haven't got down that it's give or take 1.8 minutes per mark. Okay, that's a really good guideline, because you'll see as we go through the actual report, the external examiner goes on about students' poor time management here as well. So 1.8 minutes per mark, and yes, I know you can use that 15 minutes. If you have a look at my top 5 tips video, I've given you a breakdown as to what I would do in terms of actually how I would allocate that time effectively if I had to do that exam again. The external has also put on here that you can sit this exam as a computer-based exam in a different kind of format, and the key thing there is, we'll come on to it later on, students have got some particular issues in terms of the actual formatting of it as well, and getting their ideas down. So we'll come on to that later on as well, but it's just so that you're aware of these sort of things and the other options. So let me take you through, nice and easy, and my technique, if you've not sort of watched one of my videos on this before, is all I'm interested in are the key facts, the key figures, and the key points as well. So as you can see on the left and the right hand side, take any screenshots you want, any photos, I really don't mind. It's a case of this is what I thought, or the information I wanted to know to go with the external examiner's report that is going to add as much value as possible to you as well. So let's get kicked off on this, start to walk and talk it through for you. So first of all, we've got 2 sections, A and B, nice and easy, okay? So section A, as you can see on the screen, has 3 10-mark objective test questions. That's the first key term to get down, so that we differentiate between section B. These are sort of mini case studies from various topics, and the sort of key challenges as we have on here, as I highlighted, was they can be pulled out from any area of the syllabus. So in other words, if you don't know one of these 10 markers, then I'm sorry, you're turning this exam into, I've got 100 marks and I need to hit 50, versus, well, I've got 90 marks now and I've got to hit 50. That is going to make your job so much harder, and for me personally is one of the key areas as to why students fail this exam, not going through and covering all of the syllabus. As you can see on the left hand side, I've got that it is 30 marks, so give or take 54 minutes in terms of allocated time to this as well. Coming on to section B now, and just look on the actual right hand side of the document as to what is the breakdown here and what it actually entails, because section B has 3 constructive response questions, or CRQs as they're known, and these are more scenario-based questions. You've got to be really applying your knowledge to that scenario, and if you fail to do so, well, if you fail to prepare and see what the examiner says further on, wow, you better fail to prepare and prepare to fail, I'm afraid, because this is fundamentally another one of the areas where students do not pass this exam on. There is the breakdown as well on the side there as to, well, what does this actually relate to? Well, it's one 30-mark question, which will be about 54 minutes again. Then we've got 2 20-mark questions, another CRQs, give or take about 36 minutes each as well. Again, we've got the breakdown of time in my other video. I'm more interested in what the external examiner thought, and we'll go through this. So we've got the key challenges for Section A in terms of the actual material, but Section B is again another area where it's won or lost in terms of it, I would say, where the key areas, as the externals point out on here, identifying knowledge gaps, again, offering guidance, and where the exam technique could be improved. So these are fundamental things you'll hear again and again and again going through this report as well. Look at the interesting point I've hinted on the side there. Because I actually said it was going to be a computer-based examination, the actual external examiner has hinted here, especially for Section B, so if you're doing the computer-based exam, pay particular attention to Section B, that the actual computer-based examination functionality in answering the questions was another area that students struggled with. If you hop over to ACCA's website and pop in Audit and Assurance, they have practice questions on there so you get used to the system. So get that noted down if you're going to do it on a computer-based section, because people and students are throwing away marks, especially in Section B. But the externals hinted there are strengths in this as well, but we'll come on to it later on. But it's sort of giving us a breakdown now of Section A, that we have 3 10-mark questions, and this is actually 18 minutes long in terms of this. So for every 10-mark question, 18 minutes long. If you do struggle in terms of your actual time management, I've also done a study with me video on this as well. So it's actually on my channel. It tells you for a 10 marker, you can play the video. I've got a countdown timer on it. This is the exam technique that I specifically did for 10 markers, 20 markers, 30 markers. Do it to time, and then be so strict on your marking for it as well. This is so you get better at exam practice and those actual past paper questions, applying to the scenario and covering all the sections as well. So again, we've got the actual breakdown of Section B on there. But the key thing to highlight on here, that Section A, as you can see on the screen, has a broad range of the syllabus topics, so it's quite hard to actually question pick off or cherry pick the actual ones that will come up. But for Section B, the main thing the external examiner actually pointed out was the application of audit and assurance in more depth. Application in more depth. That is another critical thing from my experience studying this exam, because I did loads of practice papers, marked it myself, was so critical, and I'd be getting 30s and 40s, whatever. I might get the odd one in the 50s, but especially from having a lack of actual audit experience, you have to be so critical on yourself and to get to know the actual process top to bottom on this. So in order to pass the examinations, well, what did the external examiner say here? And as you can see from my note, important statement I had down here as to candidates who do not spend sufficient time practicing questions are unlikely to be successful. And it's in particular aim to test the candidate's application skills. So that there are just fundamental buzzwords that the external continually uses. Application, application, application. You can't just learn the textbook general answer, which they are out there for, whether that be analytical procedures or internal controls, whatever it may be. You've got to take it and apply it to that specific company, the specific industry as well, and the specific scenario. Because, say for example, you're not talking about PPE or something on those lines, well, you might as well wave goodbye to some of those marks. You've been warned. But the external examiner warns us again as we go through. So let's get rock and rolling onto Section A now. Really important stuff. So these are the object test questions. So these, you're going to have 3 on here, and like I said, 80 minutes per 10 marker. Highlighted again, work through past exam questions on here, especially for Section A. The broad range of the syllabus being covered, and, well, we've got another key point: revise all areas of the audit and assurance syllabus again, rather than attempting 2 question spots. So I've just repeated there what the external examiner has actually put in context in the actual point down here. But we've got on here for Section A what those areas were highlighted for July 2020. So we've got principles of assurance, okay, substantive procedures, including non-current assets, provisions, contingencies, So if you mention provisions or contingencies, that is where you've got to aim your focus on. We've got going concern on there, so is the business actually viable into the future? Can we see it continuing? And the actual auditor's report, so make sure you're comfortable with the actual format. If you've never seen an auditor's report, go online, do a bit of research and find out about it. The other tip on here as to, well, we're looking at the actual July 2020 External Examiner's Report. Well, they're going to be topics in the previous External Examiner's Report, so head over to ACCA's website, check them out in terms of it, because you'll be able to pick off those 4 that we've got here, add them to the other 4, add them to the other 4, and before you know it, you've got a massive bank as to, well, am I comfortable on all of these areas? And if the question is no, then you know where to direct your actual revision to. That would be something that I definitely do. See what had come up in the previous sort of 3-4 exams, I'd say, maybe 5. Treat yourself. Be okay. So, now moving on, still Section A focused here, but we're getting now into a bit more detail as well on this. So, feel free to actually pause the video and hit. There are so many key points, but I'm just going to walk and talk you through what I was thinking in this case. So this is all about future candidates, an indication of the types of questions asked, guidance on dealing with exam questions, technical debrief on their specific questions selected. So candidates are reminded that there will be a mix of application and knowledge questions in Section A. So get that jotted down. Application and specific knowledge as well. So that is going to be in regards to the actual audit process. That is going to be absolutely fundamental. And they've also gone to hint on their actual international standards on auditing there, ISAs, ACCA's Code of Ethics and Conduct, and the UK Corporate Governance Code. So these are areas where they might actually refer to a specific ISA, or, as you can see on here, we've got relevant financial accounting, so there could be a topical article on this as well. Articles are hinted further down in the actual paper, so please make sure, head over to ACCA's website. They've got the list of all of the upcoming and modern ones out there, and all the latest ones, shall I say, in terms of it. So relevant financial accounting and important areas of the syllabus, such as the auditor's report. And that includes the auditor's opinion as well. Is it modified or unmodified? Get that jotted down, because it also goes on to say the appropriate level as well. As you can see on the right hand side, when I see codes of ethics, and it comes up in past paper questions all the time in audit, you have got to know these off the top of your head straight away. Integrity, objectivity, professional competence and due care, confidentiality and professional behaviour. So those are the ACCA Codes of Ethics, the 5 main areas that you would have to take and then apply to the actual scenario that you're given as well. The UK Corporate Governance Code has certain updates as well, so that can be article related along with the ISAs as well. So find examples from past papers where they've come up, get it on a piece of paper as to, well, that came up in that one, jot it down, and then I'd have a page for Corporate Governance Code, a page for ISAs, and a page for ethics as well. Keep it all collated, then you can see if there are any trend patterns on there as well. Finding examples is going to be absolutely critical, and visualizing and seeing that application. So we've got on here, therefore, candidates must ensure that they have studied these in sufficient depth. Okay, so what's that referring to? Do you have a knowledge of it? Well, yes, you'd have heard about it in some past papers, but it's a case of, can you remember certain ISAs in terms of it? Can you remember all of those actual codes of ethics? And can you remember what the actual corporate code of governance actually, or what does it actually do? And then if you've got a governance question, how you could apply it to it. That's the key thing. Well, what else have we got on here? Candidates must also ensure that they have studied all areas, hinted at again on there, and the syllabus includes audit evidence, learning objectives, outcomes relating to a wide range of specific items. Keyword being specific there. So, like we had up there before in terms of PPE or something on those lines, if you don't talk about PPE, you can just wave goodbye to so many marks in terms of this. but it's taking those items highlighted above and then applying it. That'll be where you get the most added value and where you're going to pick up on the most marks here. So coming on to example 1, and again, have a sip of coffee, sip of tea. Let's get cracking on this. So we've got to now first of all consider the level in the question. So first of all, we've got on there from July 2005, you are the actual audit supervisor. So you're not the actual manager or director in terms of it. Think of it in terms of a hierarchy now as well. You are currently undertaking the audit testing. So think in terms of the process where you're at in relation to non-current assets. Key thing there. Be specific in your answer to non-current assets. If you've gone about liabilities or equity or the income statement, yes, it may overlap in terms of impacting, but you've got to be direct, specific, and applying it back to non-current assets at the audit testing level. This is where it comes on to my actual tips of how to pass the actual examination now. In my other video, we've got to be identifying in the question what are the key terms. So just take a moment, read it through. Which two of the following procedures would provide substantive audit evidence in respect to the completeness assertion for plant and machinery? Notice how I'm only underlining and highlighting the key terms there. Two procedures, okay? Audit evidence, substantive, and the completeness assertion. So it's got to be in terms of, is this actually complete in terms of the plant and machinery? You've got to be thinking with sort of your auditor's hat on. Lots of accountants refer to it as that. You've got to be going away from that textbook approach and thinking, if I was an auditor in this situation, reading through these different options, okay, what am I thinking in terms of it? So we've got to go through the actual keywords linking to the actual financial statement assertions, and fundamental on the left hand side, let me bring it down in terms of this, what are those financial statement assertions? And this is where you can remember them nice and easy. You can see it on the side there, we've got cover ACCA in terms of it. It goes all the way down, it's all abbreviated in terms of it. If you can remember cover ACCA, they are the starting letters with, as you can see on here, the first one we had in terms of completeness, so that's your C, O for occurrence, V for valuation, E for existence, R for rights and obligations, then coming on to the ACCA part now, A for allocation, C for classification, C for cutoff, and then finally A for accuracy. These are key buzzwords that you need to remember going into the audit and assurance examination. This is where you can be specific as to applying it to the actual example and the scenario that you've had in front of you as well. Let me just come on to the actual notes, as you can see on the right hand side now. So I've highlighted as I went through this, we've got specific again to plant and machinery upkeep. But as I'm reviewing it through, yes, I've got to work out what the correct answers are, but can I work out why the others are wrong as well? So notice on part B there, I've got not specific enough to plant and machinery, whereas for part A we've got a sample of assets held in factory or warehouse, record the asset identifying number as marked on the asset and trace back to the relevant entry in the non-current asset register. That is really specific as to actual audit evidence on there. But let's pull it further down, because yes, you've got the actual answers on there in terms of it, but notice how I just went through what some answers were just more specific than others, and if they're not specific enough, that is a real good trigger as to ask yourself why that one is actually wrong. But let me take you down to the actual external examiners. Whoa, trying to multitask now. What did the external examiners say in regards to this? So yes, we've identified that A and C were the correct answers, and just note on the side of the paragraphs as to the first paragraph has A and C's reasons for it, and I've also highlighted on there for you the key words that we had there for the assertions for the financial statement. So you can see we've got completeness, we've got existence on there, and we've got valuation. If you remember these words, you can apply it, get it into your actual knowledge as well. It's going to really help you. So they're saying here, why are they correct? Exactly that mindset that we had when going through the question. So provides evidence of completeness, so referring back to what the actual overall question said, to the total balance of the plant's machinery, so we're actually justifying it that it is complete, and it's recorded on the actual register as well. Brilliant. In terms of it, we are tracing from the register the actual physical asset back to that actual register as well. The balance must also include all relevant capital expenditures. So this comes on to actual part C now. If capital expenditure had been expensed in error, then the balance would not be completed as a result. So with capital expenditure, if it goes to property, plant, and equipment, you've either got capital on one side or revenue on the other. If it is complete, then that will balance. So the capital amount will balance to what the PPE is saying to us. If there is an error, some of it has gone over to revenue expenditure on there. But notice how they refer to does it exist and completeness. Back onto those assertions we talked about. So rolling it down now as to, and the first key note I've got on the side there, notice the level of detail in the points here. So yes, we're talking about actually we've got wrong questions, but there was some attempt at actually trying to get it to be right. So there just isn't the right detail and specificness in the actual answers here. So we've got reviewing the board minutes, okay, reasonable. Evidence of authorization is a test of control and therefore does not provide substantive evidence in terms of this. Right, okay, brilliant. That's a case of, well, we don't actually have enough in terms of specificness and it doesn't relate to what the question is asking for us as well. In terms of for part D, so it's not confirming completeness because the inquiry regarding the fully depreciated assets would provide evidence in relation to valuation, not completeness. That actually we are looking for here as well. So again, relating it back to what we had on the register versus verifying the actual physical assets on here as well. You've got to think like an auditor. That is the key thing in terms of this. Think of the process, and if you've not had any audit experience, there are loads of resources on the ACCA's website that take you through the actual flow of what an auditor actually goes through as well. I put all the details of that in the description below. But I want to make sure we get stuck in. We're only on page 2. Oh, hold tight, hold tight. We've got some more stuff to go through now. So this question demonstrates the need for candidates to be able to apply their knowledge. So that links back to what they mentioned at the start for section A of substantive procedures. That keyword again as to actually the process you're going to be going through. The nature of the evidence obtained by performing the actual specific procedure. Specific procedure as well. Gosh, getting too excited having to go through it because we had the completeness assertion. You've got the list of them now on the left hand side up above. Scroll back if you need to go get it. And why is this important? Well, it's important because we're being able to distinguish between a substantive procedure and a test of control. Okay, we're coming on to other key terms and key areas you need to be comfortable with as well. So, test of control is the information managed to promote correctness in terms of this. So, a test of control is an audit procedure designed, and as you can see on the left hand side, I've got, this is so key. This is so key. Right, we'll bring it back. So, a test of control is an audit procedure designed to, let me ping it down here, more key terms up at the top there. So, designed to evaluate the operating effectiveness of controls, whereas a substantive procedure is designed to detect material misstatement at an assertion level. That's why we have those assertion principles up there. Confusing the test of controls and substantive procedures is a common error. So if you haven't already, get that sentence jotted down as to what is the difference between the two, and notice the keyword on there for keyword, should I say, for material misstatement, and relating it back to those assertion levels as well. There are some keywords I've got at the top there that we'll come on to it later on, but avoid the word check. I see it in papers that I mark as well as, oh, check this and check that. you're not being specific enough. Just get that written right at the top of all of your notes. Very fundamental, as that will really help improve that auditor's hat and that auditor's mindset. So I put down some on here as to inquire, inspection, observation, confirmation, analytical procedures as well. And this could be the difference to getting those extra marks in the bank for you as well. You've got to know the difference between the two, a common area and another place where unfortunately ACCA students will fail this paper. It happened in this sitting, it happened in the previous sitting, it'll happen in future sittings. By watching this video, you are going to be more than prepared for it as well. So let's take you on to example 2 now in terms of this. Stay with me. Gosh, plenty more to go through. So much information on here and so much added value. I just want to make sure it all gets transpired to you. So what have we got on here? It is the 1st of July 2005 and this is after the year end, so picking up on all the question details. A & Co or external auditors B & Co. Don't mix them up. That is another common mistake. And we had for the year ended 31st of March 2005. As I said, the event happened after the year end. So BCO had sourced external finance for the first time. Circle that, highlight that, put it on there. These are clues within the question that help you out in an audit exam. In relation to the draft financial statements that show non-current liabilities in relation to the loan finance of, and we've been given a figure, $1.2 million. The first time, it's a first source of finance. Really key to pick up on there. But coming on to the actual requirement now, which of the following procedures should be performed to confirm the loan liability balance? Read the phrase back to yourself. This is a really key thing that students read the requirement but don't fully understand what it actually means. And so when you come on to the larger narrative questions, if you've read the requirement the wrong way and you've just gone like a bat out of hell and just sort of writing away everything you think, if you're not answering the requirement, nil point. Right, let's read the phrase back again to yourself. Which of the following procedures should be performed to confirm, keyword on there, the loan liability balance at the year end? Right, interesting stuff. Let's roll it forward then as to, well, what did I pick up in terms of the actual notes on there? So we've got actually reviewing the board minutes for evidence of approval of the external finance. Well, yes, but it's not specifically relating to, and again, the balance for a test of control. Agree the loan payments recorded in the general ledger to the bank statements to confirm capital has been repaid. Even when you just hear me say that and read it through, you go to yourself, key and specific terms identified of a loan, reference where they are going to and from as well. Okay, very nice in terms of that, I agree, because we've got the capital amount and the payments as well, so that's really important there. Looking at 3, agree the year-end loan liability balance to the bank confirmation letter as well. So that's a third party reconciling, and it relates specifically to the balance. Key that we picked up on that in our question analysis. And for point 4 on there, compare loan liabilities at the end of the year to balances in the previous year. Well, as you remember, well, you can see on my notes on there, but is this going to confirm the loan liability balance for us? Well, remember this is our first time, so as you can see from the answer on there, that is completely not what we're looking for as well. Well, we've got on here the paragraph at the top confirming why the 2 answers are correct. So try to picture what is going on in terms of how the company's operating, that loan amount as well, and the first time. Because with a loan, you've got payments to trace as well. We've got the actual original amount. So tracing the loan payments to the ledger, to the bank statements, allows the auditor to confirm the capital amount has been repaid and reconcile the closing balance. So specific as well. Confirmation of the balance to the bank letter provides third-party evidence of that as well. So being really specific, applying our knowledge to the scenario and understanding from an auditor's point of view how we can actually get some completeness in there and actual clarity that the information we have is actually what we can rely upon it, should we say, in terms of that. So really key there, and look at the specifics in terms of the actual points we're talking about in terms of the loan here. So let's just move on to the next paragraph on here as to, well, what else was going on in terms of this sort of question. And I even wrote cheeky on here, but we'll come on to that in a second. So the procedure described in statement 1 is a test of control. As such, it does not provide evidence of the year-end balance itself. So it's a control to see what's going on in the business, but it doesn't relate to the requirement that we were asked for. That is the key thing here. Now, don't hate the external for this, but they've written on here, candidates should be aware that tests of controls may be included as distractors in questions. So you've got to know what they are, because in questions involving substantive procedures and vice versa, you've got to know the difference between the two. So cheeky, but yes, it's designed to catch students out who don't fully understand what is going on and why it's happening. Hence this video. But we carry on, we plow on. So what else have we got on here? So comparing the loan liability at the current year end compared to the previous would not be a valid procedure. Sourced external finance for the first time during the year. So in other words, having a look back on last year, it didn't have any figures on it, so it's completely meaningless. Candidates must apply their knowledge of substantive procedures as well. But I've written on the side here, great question to ask yourself for this type of question. Well, let's get on to that so you can apply your knowledge, as you can see on here. So you can see again the word specific in terms of this. In this case, candidates were required to take into account the specific circumstances described in the scenario when considering whether a procedure would be appropriate or not. So given lots of information, but you've got to know how it applies back to that scenario again, what we're given. Candidates must ensure that they answer, the objective test questions here within the context set, in the scenario, rather than responding to them as a standalone question itself. So the key thing there is to ask yourself, when you're doing a past paper, when you're doing book questions or anything on those lines, ask yourself that question at the bottom there. Am I specifically answering the question and to the scenario, or am I just providing a textbook answer? And if you can answer that question and say, I'm providing a specific answer, James, relating it and applying it back to the scenario and applying all of my key audit and assurance knowledge, big tick, I'm on to a winner with that one. So that concludes us for actual section A on there. So again, if you want to pause the video now, go have a little walk around. I'm going to carry on in terms of this as well, but make sure you get all those notes down and feel free to play this video back again as well. There are so many actual key points in there. But that was for the 30 marks and where the students usually make bad mistakes. But we are now given some key areas for section B. And these are absolutely fundamental. Same technique what I would do if I was in your position doing this exam for the first time or redoing it again. They will do a breakdown in the previous external examiner's report. So go through them again, see what those key areas are. And as you can see on here, plenty of notes that we're going to go through now, head to toe. Stay with me, all good. So first of all, note those down on the side there. We're going to have paragraphs on each of the different areas, starting with the audit framework and regulation. I'm going to take you through in terms of the actual key terms and key points that I've got down for this. So take the techniques of this video and apply it to your own work as well. I've also put on there some other key words of advice that I just learned from my actual experience of studying this exam. So actually referring to the ISAs in terms of it and applying it to the given scenario, that is what an external examiner would love to see in terms of it. The actual exam technique is fundamentally key here. We'll come on to it in terms of how the marks are broken down. Structure and writing style. Don't waste time just writing down anything that you want to answer. Write what the external wants to answer and structure it accordingly, so you're actually given in questions number of actual points on there and marks it's associated to. We've got provide relatable examples, not just paragraphs you've remembered from a book or what you've read, And be specific and critical. So again, that word, not just check this or refer to the board minutes. Specific, apply, be critical in terms of it. Wear that auditor's hat and imagine you are an auditor going into that examination. Forget about your phone, forget about social media and what you're doing after the exam. When you hit this exam and you're going through your actual revision, past papers, just remember you are an auditor for this. Even if you've had zero audit experience and you're new to the actual area, just keep saying to yourself, whenever I come to my audit and assurance books, I am an auditor, and I've got to think like an auditor, I've got to be like an auditor, and I've got to be specific like an auditor as well. But not to spoil the fun as we go through, we're going to come on to the audit framework now and regulation. So what does it do and how does it work as well? Okay, so this is areas of the syllabus, understanding the functions of an audit, key things on here, corporate governance and professional ethics. Oh, lo and behold, we've already seen that before. You've already got notes on that. Notice how it comes up again, section B. How does that actually apply? And as I said before, there are resources on ACCA's website, all free as to the functions of an audit. It goes through it top to bottom as to what's the sort of process, and you'll be able to actually put those jigsaw pieces all together as to how corporate governance and ethics all fit in as well. But you've got to understand the core knowledge behind it. I can't stress enough in terms of if you don't have the core knowledge in terms of the 5 professional ethics and what corporate governance actually means and does, then you're going to really struggle to actually apply that as well. So pay particular attention to that in your revision. And again, the actual external examiner here has said you need to apply your answers back to the scenario. These are scenario-based questions. So if you're not applying it back to the actual company's name, what's going on, identify and explain, as you can see on here, you are going to miss out and throw away marks. Just imagine there's a bin at the front of your examination, whether you're doing it on a computer or face-to-face or pen and paper. And if you're not applying it to the scenario, take those marks and just throw them in the bin, because if you're not applying it and you're not relating it to the scenario, as they've reiterated again, just say goodbye to those marks. So we've got on here, notice 3 requirements for marks. We're going to come on to the breakdown of this. So it's a case of, yes, it will say to you in terms of maybe, for example, on the side there, you've got a 10-mark question, identify 5 issues, classic, okay, in terms of this. So identify 5 points of blah blah blah, and that's going to give you 10 marks on this. Okay, 2 marks per point, but you've got to know the breakdown. This is absolutely paramount. So you've got a different coloured pen, highlighter. I should have put it in stars or something on the side there. Where past paper practice will help, and also where students fail the exam, because you need 50 to pass. Okay. And if you're only getting 1 out of 2, you are seriously limiting yourself on this. So let me take you through. Candidates are generally asked to identify and explain, okay, sets of issues, and give relevant recommendations to address the issues identified. Circle identify, circle explain, and circle recommendations. Candidates are awarded that first half mark for identifying, okay, so whatever it may be, ethical threat, corporate governance deficiency as well. Half mark out of 2. You only get a half mark, you're going to fail. Next one, you get half mark for explaining it, and you've got to go into enough detail there so the external knows you know what you're on about. That is 1 out of 2, and they are tricky to get as well. That is 50, that is a pass, but you've got to do that for every single question. That is why students fail this exam. It then comes on to that final 1 mark where candidates are awarded 1 mark for actually explaining the recommendation. So applying it to the scenario, what is going on, and how can you help in terms of it as to what you can advise being an auditor. You can now start to see that from a potential 2 marks, and I know it doesn't sound a lot, but this sort of technique is applied so much in this exam. If you're only getting half a mark out of those 2, no wonder you're putting yourself on the back foot. And unfortunately, this is one of the main reasons why students fail this exam. Whew. Had to get that out there. That's important. But you'll hear me talk about that as we go through again now. It's that breakdown and picking up on the verbs in the actual question. So candidates often do not explain the implication clearly for that threat or deficiency in terms of this. So in terms of it, this is where the external's trying to explain to you why you didn't get the first mark in terms of identifying, why you didn't get the other half for explaining, and then why you didn't get the 1 mark for actually recommending in terms of it. I've got on the side that notice the level of detail that you're going to have to go into and to justify it. So the implications to the financial statements for explaining why, candidates must include an explanation as to why this is the case for their response. So an appropriate explanation, the threat created, figures versus ethical issues on here as well. So stating potentially that the profit and loss account is overstated or understated, maybe the property, plant and equipment is over or understated, but you're actually explaining it in great detail and relating it back to that scenario as well. That is how you pick up on that half mark. But the key thing here is with that half mark, yes, you think, oh, it's only half or whatever it may be, but another half here, another half there, another half there, another half there. If you unfortunately failed this exam with 49, that is one of the techniques you need to start applying to get you over the edge for next time as well. If you have unfortunately failed the Audit and Assurance examination, I've done another video on the channel as well that you can go through with my tips as to how you can approach the exam going through again. So if you have, check it out, it is on there as well. Tips from my experience, as I have unfortunately failed exams. It's not ideal in terms of it. Coming on to the next part on here then, when making recommendations for ethical and corporate governance questions, so this is another exam technique area, get that pen and paper ready on here. This is where we have objectives versus actions. Really key that the recommendation must be an action. So if you're an auditor and you're in that situation, you've got to give a clear action as to what you're going to do as a result, not just an objective of how to take it forward, actually something they're going to go and do. That is the next key thing on here. We've also been given actual examples of questions that are good scenario-based questions. Check them out, go and attempt them as well. The external has highlighted them because it's probably where students in the past have made many mistakes on ethical issues, scenario-based questions and corporate governance. So get it jotted down, 2019 on the sample paper on there as well. Go check it out, be all good. Now, and again on there I've put, remember, actions. Actions speak louder than words. Whew, get that down as well. Point 2 now, planning and risk assessment. Risk is so fundamental in this examination. You've got to be comfortable with risk. And as you can see on here, critical paragraph and understanding required. So take a screenshot, get it jotted down, pause the video, I don't mind in terms of this. So this is the area of the syllabus about how the auditor obtains and accepts audit engagements, obtains an understanding of the entity, so as you're an auditor, who you're actually dealing with, its environment, so how they trade, how they go about their business, assesses the risk of material misstatements so that we actually may have to change the actual audit opinion now as well, and plans an audit of the financial statements, so how we're going to go through that process. So many fundamental points in that as well. Questions on assessing audit risk tend to be scenario based again, where you're going to have to, and this is a fantastic tip for the audit and assurance paper, is I really developed this, especially when I went and did the advanced audit and assurance paper, is there are key trigger words within a question where you can see on here, I just put a little 1 at the top there on identify and then a number 2 on explain. That was a trigger for me from exam technique that have I identified and have I explained? Because if I have, I've got points down, then at least I've got a chance of getting that first half mark for identifying and then the next half mark for the actual risks of the scenario. And given an auditor's response, so the action to address these risks. So that should be point 3 on there as well as to going at the full 2 marks for it. Other questions in this area of the syllabus tend to be more knowledge-based questions. So really good exam technique described here. Put those little 1s and 2s and 3s above the verbs in the key words on there, or if you can, highlight it as well. It's triggers so you just don't forget, and then you can check them off, check them off, check them off. Poof. At least you know, psychologically, you've had a good go at all of the available marks. because some students just completely miss the actual target and the actual requirement on there. So I said risk was important, and lo and behold, look at the notes on here. Gosh, how about this? Well, we're going to go through it, and again, you've got access to these. The ball is in your court, but it's that same technique again. I've highlighted it in yellow on there for you so that you get the most out of this. So it's all about the assessment of audit risk, and this remains a highly examinable area in terms of you're doing audit and assurance, you might be an auditor in the future, you're going to have risk, okay? But it's that same technique as you can see on that. I put the example, identify and explain in terms of, well, and also in terms of this, what the actual response is. So it could be a 10-mark question, 5 points, and this is the breakdown. Half mark for identify, half mark for explain, and 1 mark for the audit response as well. This is the actual one of the key areas, as I said above, where students will fail the exam. But by watching this video, you've now got a nice breakdown for it, and we're going to be coming on to the table format the external examiner refers to in the coming pages below. So hang on with me, I've got it all sorted for you. It's all good. This is why you need to probably watch this video once or twice, maybe 3 times, because you enjoy it so much, and you'll be kicking yourself when you go through it again. You go, oh James, how did I not know that? This is one of the key areas where I have failed. Let me know in the comments, it'll be fine. But let's go through it now. Typically, candidates required to identify and explain in the region of 6 to 8 risks and responses. So the exam tip here, if you actually have time, there's no harm in putting down another one if you have, but this is an extremely time-pressured exam. But if you've got 5 minutes at the end, you think, oh, that point's a bit weak, that's a bit weak. What they're saying here is, if you're only asked to identify 5, there's probably about 8 in the actual scenario that you could refer to. So if you think a couple a week, no harm in putting down a 6th in terms of it, if you've got time. That's the key thing. The scenarios usually contain more issues, as we've said on there, required to be discussed. Planning time is paramount in terms of this. Candidates did not identify the relevant fact of the scenario, so we're actually coming on to now reasons why candidates and students failed in terms of this. So these are all about mistakes on audit and risk questions now. So the first mistakes, we've got current and prior year, we've got key phrases, timeline and date periods are fundamental and critical for an audit. So candidates did not identify the relevant fact from the scenario, or they did not understand the audit risk that was given to them as well. So this comes down to, and I understand it's exam pressure on the day, especially if you've never been an auditor before, but you've just got to settle down, loads of practice questions, do them to time, use the resources as well. So they've given the actual Harlem Clo example on there, so feel free to go and check it out as well, because the concern here and where students went wrong was when the asset was purchased, and that was in the prior year. So the mistake was made in terms of the timeline and dates and the period as well. Current year versus prior year, check it out for your revision and the past papers. And I've seen online, and some people contact me to say, oh James, how many past papers should I do? Can I get away with 1 or 2? For this examination, you've got to be doing as many as possible. We've already seen in this paper alone, the external examiners referred to 2018, 2019 and 2020 papers. So that's over the course of 3 years. So get down as many as possible and go through them to time as well. Find your working environment where you can focus on it, put your phone in another room, don't think about it, and then you'll be spot on for that. So the key phrase that we've got to highlight here, so it was in the current year, the auditor needed to focus on whether amortization had been appropriately charged. Candidates must take time to read the scenario carefully to ensure that they correctly understand the audit risk arising. And I just put classic error in audit and assurance exam. Well, the reason for that is it's because loads of students would have misread it, wrote their answer thinking, oh, I've had a good go at that. The external examiner and the marker, and I've had this loads of times, read and go, well, it's actually not answering the requirement. So you can maybe get 1 mark at the most, but 1 mark out of a possible 6, you can see why so many students fail this exam. Read the requirement carefully, loads of practice questions as well. Let's come on then, more risk factors at the beginning of the scenario opening paragraph. So we'll start on the right hand side. We've got new client and client for a number of years. So this is where different exams will have different scenarios laid out for you. You've got to get familiar with the trigger bits in the questions. So the question analysis is absolutely key and paramount. We'll come on to more questions below. Exam technique on here again, we've got identify, explain, recommend, exam technique, exam technique, exam technique. Notice on here, so they're referring to that actual question from above. The actual information can be in the actual opening paragraph and can be in the end paragraph or the closing paragraph. So whether it's a new audit client, missing these points can be really, really easy marks for you to actually gain as well. So don't overlook it. In terms of this, a significant number of candidates, this is the external examiner says on here, did not explain how each issue could impact on audit risk. So reading between the lines on that, that's a case of, well, they got the half mark for identifying, they didn't get the other half mark in terms of explaining, and from the recommendation, well, if they got that wrong, they probably got the other one wrong, didn't they? So that's half a mark out of 2, which isn't enough to pass. To explain audit risk, candidates must state the specific area of the financial statements impacted with an assertion on there. Cut-off valuation. So go back to that cover ACCA reference to an under, over, or misstated financial statements on there. This is absolutely key exam technique, and in terms of keywords, you've got to get down and you've got to be incorporating in your past paper questions as well. We've got to reference inherent risk, control risk, or detection risk as well. Get that down now. That is paramount on there in terms of there is so much value, and that comes up in so many other areas. I should have probably highlighted that in yellow, but I'm telling you now, so that's okay. But if you've got a friend who's doing audit and assurance, one good way to actually learn it even better is to teach someone else. So tell them about the assertions and the different levels of risk from this. Good grief, so much important stuff. Right, a number of candidates as well stated the risk was under or overstated. Okay, that's good. That's the next step in terms of gaining more marks. When it was clear, one or the other hand were not awarded the credit. Okay, so let's just break that down in terms of that. So what the external examiner there is saying is that candidates wrote down that the financial statements were over/understated. But by writing down over/or understated, you're not being specific as to, well, is it actually over or actually under? They wrote both down. If you write both down, you don't get the marks for it. That is the key thing there. Demonstrated knowledge that you know what's going on, but not able to apply it to the scenario, no marks for that, I'm afraid. So, you've been warned. State, is it over or under? Stated with examples, and we've got the actual correct approach here. So refer back to the 2019 March and June papers, high levels of inventory rather than physical counts. So first of all, they've got it down there, there's a risk that the actual inventory is overstated, the total assets are going to be overstated, and a sort of scattergun approach is not recommended. So you've got to be, again, specific is the way to go. The more specific you are and you apply it to the scenario about the inventory, saying it's overstated, relating it to the assertions, what level of risk, stakeholders that will be impacted, that is where the added value is in terms of your marks as well. And I hope when you're listening to me talk this through now, you'll be going, oh my word, James, I did it once. I know where I've been going wrong. Well, don't you worry about this. There is still loads more to go through. It's a Saturday afternoon here in the UK. We've got plenty of energy to go through to add as much value to you as possible. Don't you worry about that. I've got you covered. So, candidates must state the specific area. Examiner again, a stated specific area of the financial statements impacted. So we had inventory up there, the total assets, statement of financial position. It's just so you have it in your mindset, specific versus general. If you go general, textbook answer, relying on remembering paragraphs and what it means, you're going to get limited marks in terms of that, and you're probably going to have to do the exam again, being honest about it as well. As opposed to the external examiner's written it on there, general statements. So what have we got on here in terms of it? Well, we've actually got an example there from the Scarlett Company as to where the examiners actually put on there for you no credit was awarded for stating, therefore, assets could be overstated. That is a bit harsh if you ask me, but it is the level you need to actually get to. So, therefore, we've got to say assets could be overstated, could be. Candidates must specify the particular area of the financial statements to be awarded credit. In this case, an appropriate response would be property, plant and equipment could be overstated as a result. That's the difference. That is the difference. In the question, it actually related to PPE. Assets is more of a general term because you're specific versus being general in terms of it. So you've got to say, is it over or understated, and then relate it to that particular term. So whether that's liabilities, inventory, PPE, whatever it may be. Think like an auditor and think like what the actual external examiner wants to read. Think like what the actual marker wants to read on your paper. That is the level as to why you need to actually implement it and how you're going to pass this as well. So, an auditor's response, again, thinking like an auditor, we've got to address the identified risk. So a more precise answer is required for an auditor's response. So again, thinking like an auditor. The external examiner on here, however, has put in common with previous sessions, so it's happened before, and it's going to happen again, but you're watching this now, so you're not going to do it. Auditor responses were sometimes too weak. So not specific enough, not identifying the risk, and actually saying, well, how are we going to take action according to that? So, and yes, even to note on here, gave responses that were inappropriate to the scenario. So again, pop down the textbook answer, not going to impress the marker. Auditor's response, not to the management as well. So, in actual fact, going through the requirements, you actually had to understand that it's not a management case, it's an auditor's case in terms of this as well. Some candidates focused on what the management would do rather than the auditor. Get that auditor's hat on, think that you're an auditor, you are an auditor, and work like an auditor as well. Even if you haven't been an auditor. There you go. But who knows, you might be an auditor one day. Whoa, I know you're looking at the bottom now across from my picture and going, James, there's a lot of red and there's a lot of yellow on there. I know, this is why you got to watch the video twice or 3 times. The amount of time that went into doing these notes, I know it's going to help you. So first of all, again, we've got read the requirement carefully and answer the question asked for. Get that jotted down. Am I answering the question that I've been asked for? So some candidates recommended a response to management should be a benchmark for when to investigate cash differences. So it's replying and referring to an actual scenario out there from the actual exam question. So go check it out. It's for free. ACCA's website. This is not an appropriate auditor's response and would have gained no marks. Not specific enough on there as well. We've also got the actual Harlem question on here as well, that the external examiner is actually encouraging you to actually go and have a look at. Good scenario-based question, big tick on that, on audit risk and responses to practice. So it's going to help you actually implement that exam technique for half a mark for identify, half a mark for explain, and then that 1 mark for recommend. Go give it a try, it's going to help you out there. And linking this to when I gave a talk out in India as well. The one thing the students were absolutely marvellous out there and referred to it as always, whether it's their studying or their cricket practice or whatever it may be. And I actually implement this in my running practice now and with the YouTube videos. Practice, 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 practice. It's just the levels, we've got to increase it as well. So the audit risks and response questions can also be linked to or with a knowledge question. So we've got all of those past papers on there. Get practicing as you go through. That is going to be absolutely fundamental for you. The more practice, the more past papers you do for the audit and assurance examination, the better off you are going to be. So it was noticeable in recent sessions that you've got on there. You've been warned. We've got other ones on there. Exam technique is key. core text knowledge, shall I say on here, and exam panic example, okay? Candidates should have not performed well in these knowledge questions. Gosh, and these should have been straightforward marks to obtain. So it's a case of, yes, you need to have those core texts and that textbook knowledge, but it actually came across some of the externals that some students just hadn't done enough background research in terms of this and got that core knowledge, which we're doing the audit and assurance exam here. Imagine this is the advanced one as well. That is where it's going to build on. Now, write down the bits in yellow. Disappointing this session, but candidates often did not read the requirements carefully and answers were often too generic. I bet you £1 for every external examiner's report that goes back, that statement and on those lines are in every single one in terms of this. So we've got, for example, in the sessions, candidates were asked to describe preconditions of an audit. Unfortunately, many candidates confuse preconditions with procedures. So this is what I've got down on their exam panic example, where you're in the exam computer-based or face-to-face, whatever it may be, and you're sort of panicking. You've read it through, and you think you've read procedures, and you've wrote down preconditions. And I used to see this in my actual past paper practice. I used to sit down, do it to time, and when I actually critiqued it and went through it myself, I went, I've really not answered the question there. I've missed the complete verb, and the external is getting at this here. So rather make the actual mistakes in revision, in class, online, wherever it may be, don't do it on the exam day, because it's happened before and it'll happen again. What else we got on here? So many candidates got confused, as we said on here. Future candidates, like yourself, are reminded that they must revise all areas of the syllabus, spend adequate time learning knowledge areas in preparation for the exam, and read the question requirements carefully. You have been warned. Fundamental areas, and they even the funny thing on this is they've even put must in capital letters on it. But how many students will read the external examiner's report? I don't know. That's a rhetorical one for you. That's okay. But we've still got a bit more to go through on here, but get that down. Preparation, question requirements, syllabus, adequate time learning the knowledge. Underrated, that is. Exam techniques, note down again. We've got ratios, exam tips here, and what's the marker actually looking for. So, as in previous sessions, calculating specific ratios linked to the actual risk and responses required. Yeah, spot on in terms of that from an audit perspective. Calculating more than the required number of ratios waste time, okay, and providing the formula for the ratios, you're not actually given any credit, okay. So we've got to read between the lines here what the actual external examiner is trying to get across to us, and that is, well, only calculate. So if you've got a ratios that you need to work down, write down the actual workings, give us the answer for it, and answer the specific ones for the specific years. That's all you need to do. Then you've got to interpret those ratios to what it means to the scenario that you are currently analysing. That's the key thing. Writing down all the formulas and actually wasting time and going through other ratios that may not actually relate to the requirement, don't do it. 0 credit, and you're not going to get anything for it. Being specific is going to get you a pass on this. And kindly from the external examiner's report again for more practice in terms of this. Ratio exam questions on there for Harlem, we've got on there. And what's that one? Darjeeling Co. Gosh, good questions to practice these skills for calculating ratios and applying these to risks and responses as well. Give it a go, focus on technique, see what you've got down versus what the answers get down, and be critical as to, would I really give myself half a mark for that? Probably no in terms of it, so that's where it comes down to. Right, on to the third area now, and internal control. Right, it's already been mentioned above as we had it in with section A and section B. This is a fundamental area, and notice the technique as well I've put on here for you with the 1s and the 2s and the 3s. It's the exact same mark breakdown of identify, evaluate, recommend, and this refers to internal control techniques and audit tests as well. So massive, massive exam technique here. We've got to make those appropriate recommendations, and fundamental bit on here with internal control, we've got to distinguish between the scope of internal audit and external audit as well. So get that down in terms of we're going to have to break away and how that is going to impact on our actual requirement for this. So we've got internal control questions can require, what have we got? Control deficiencies to be identified and explained and recommended. We've heard that before. To address that control deficiency in terms of it. So note down the breakdown of the marks as well, how it's going to be operating correctly in terms of this, identifying it for half a mark, first bit, explaining for another half a mark, and then the key controls as well, how they are tested. So underrated that when you get into that mindset as to, I've identified the keywords in the requirements, now I know where I'm going with this. So let's get this still going through. We've got some more yellow on here. Don't panic, we're going to go through it. We've got to assess the key controls are operating effectively. Absolutely spot on. Should have put a tick on there as to, well, as an auditor, thinking as an auditor again, the controls that we're being asked to actually audit, are they operating effectively, and how much can we actually rely upon the client's data as well, and what they've given to us. So this actually relates to, well, we've got on here, further answers may be required to be presented in the form of, right, note this down, report to management, in which case a covering letter of 2 marks is required. Oh my word, a free 2 marks in terms of knowing the format of the report to management. You've got to be saying to yourself there, well, other little notes to get on the side there. Who's it going to? They might give you a specific date as well. Who's it coming from? And what's the title of the actual report to management? You do this, you'll get the 2 marks as well. Fundamental, we get that down, because that will link into the actual internal control as we had at the top here in terms of this. So the actual test of controls with an actual report to management and a covering letter as well. Internal controls often include knowledge requirements. So the externals already said to us that some students just didn't have the knowledge, but this is the breakdown of the key areas in common with planning and risk questions. So core text and background knowledge, as stated before, that some students lack in, that is another area, but we're being specific in terms of internal controls here, planning and risk. You've got to be comfortable in both areas. We've also got down here that, unfortunately for the March sitting, the external examiner and the markers were disappointed, or it was disappointing. Candidates failed to score many marks, for example, when asked to describe matters the auditor considers in determining significant deficiencies. Okay, many candidates did not attempt the question or did not address the question specifically. I know if you are part of that exam, that may have happened to you, but we've got to answer from the auditor's perspective. You've been warned again. It is imperative that future candidates ensure that they devote adequate time to learning the knowledge areas of the syllabus, as well as practicing this style of question. So core text, past paper questions as well, again, are fundamental. You've been warned, but the external examiner now has said that, I don't even know how many times, but keeps reiterating it to you. Get it in your study plan and work out when is best that you can sit down. Because ACCA's free past papers are online. They've even noted down here for you the dates of them and also actually what the names of the companies are as well, because they are that fundamental. If you go away and do all those past papers, as you can see on the screen, I think you'll be fine, because your actual technique will start to improve as you go along. If you think you can rely on the textbook, deep breath. Gosh, it'll be a tough exam day on that one, I'd say. So what have we got on the side here? If it asks for 5 points, and they are more than 5 answers given in the actual exam. Okay, I'll see where we're coming from here. So we've got the internal controls questions remain a highly examinable area, of course. Exam questions contain more issues than the requirement. So my note on the side there is just giving me a hint as to, well, if it's asking for 5, it's more than likely got about 7 or 8 in the actual exam question. A good tip here is that there's usually an easy point in the first opening paragraph and usually an easy point in the last paragraph as well. So try to pick up on these and then fill in the middle as to other ones that you could pick up on as well. Once again in this session, oh no, have we upset the external again? In this session, a number of answers identified irrelevant key controls and deficiencies. So in other words, not answering the question at all in terms of this. And also, you need to be clear in the answer response. So giving a no deficiency arises, and this shows a misunderstanding of the role of various departments of the company. So not answering specifically what was actually going on, not being in the auditor's shoes, and actually not understanding the fundamental aspects on it here as well. Oh, good grief. Wow, it's all going to be fine for the next exam. Positive thinking, that's what's going to get you through. Hence why we go through these error issues. So you work on your technique, you can apply it to your past paper experience now. So in common with previous sessions, many candidates did not clearly explain the implication of the actual deficiency. It is important that the explanation fully details the impact on the company as well. Impact on the company and implication as well. Are we in a better or worse situation, and what are we going to do? But notice on here as well, half marks identified. We've got identification of the issue, explaining why it is an issue as well, and then we've got the actual impact and recommendation will be for the actual other mark on top of it. So get down on the left hand side there. Great example of how to apply those marks on here as well. Those are the key trigger terms you've got to be picking up in the actual examination. But it all comes down to a lack of exam technique and preparation here. As you can see, the externals again hinted and stated many candidates did not go on to fully explain the impact of the company. In other words, reading between the lines again on there, the maximum you can get is 1 mark out of 2. You've got to be going into more detail and applying it to the scenario and answering all of the requirements. Without doing that, you're going to really struggle on this exam. I'm quite honest, that's okay. If I'm not honest, then this is where you're going to get maximum value from this video. So most candidates are able to provide good recommendations, okay? So you've probably got at least half mark out of 1 there. However, some recommendations were either poorly described, so not enough detail, did not correctly address the specific deficiency identified. So if we're talking about a system error or something on those lines, or technology error, you've got to be relating that actual recommendation to that system requirement. Impractical suggestions or inappropriately suggested. So I've actually put on the side here, obviously we've got detail and being precise is key, but these are points on here as to how not to answer an ACCA audit and assurance exam question as well. So, for example, recommending that the financial controller should review all of the reconciliations without going on to state that the financial controller should show evidence of this. So it's all well going through and reviewing it, but if there's no evidence of it, how are we going to reconcile? Look at these key words on here. Evidence, review, reconcile, incomplete. These are the words that you need to be applying as well. And being clear, describing it to the external. So, moving on further down, there's still some more notes on this, and I know you're going, oh my word, but don't worry, I got you. I've got you. We'll be fine. Many candidates just repeated the converse of the deficiency. Oh my word. This is why students fail this exam right here. They just, to obtain the 1 mark for the recommendation, you need more detail. Note down this exam technique. Additionally, as with ethics and corporate governance questions, recommendations must be actions rather than just objectives. So stating what you're going to do and why that is the case as well. How is it going to help? Actions, actions, actions. Think like an auditor here. And again, the lovely work of the external. Notice the wording here from the external examiners. Questions are all good. Internal control deficiencies and recommendation questions to practice. So in other words, go through those on there. Internal control deficiencies, recommendation questions to practice. You do those, you're going to be fine. You're not going to actually answer questions in the incorrect way. You're going to be stating actions, as we said above, and this is where you're going to develop your actual exam technique. It's very nice of them. Give them the questions as well, which ones to go to. Candidates should also be prepared to answer questions which cover both key controls and test of controls, as well as control deficiencies and recommendations. So those 4 key points on there, get those down as another key areas that you need to be comfortable with. We're going to identify the key controls and recommendations. So it may ask for 5 points for 10 marks, as we said before. Or we've actually had in previous exam questions, so check out on the left, it said identify 3 points here for 6 marks. So it's exactly the same process. For each point you're making, 2 marks per one, with the breakdown we've covered in terms of half mark, 1 mark. Oh no, it was disappointing that some candidates were not able to identify the key controls. So in other words, if you're not going to pick up on the first half mark, well, you're going to say goodbye to the other 1.5 as well. But you're going to have to do more past paper practice to get better at this. Whether the control has described or has been appropriately designed and is being operated in such a way that it would in fact prevent or detect a material misstatement. Notice how they're always relating it back to material misstatement, because this will impact on the auditor's opinion as well. Is it going to have to be modified or not? Key audit wording identified here. What does this mean for the auditor? And impact on the business. Notice I'm trying to incorporate impact and the words the external examiners reusing here as well. Limits once set are not reviewed. Oh gosh, well, they're giving you actual examples here of what not to do. This is not a key control on which the auditor may seek to place reliance, not an effective control. Lack of subsequent review resulted in a control deficiency. So going into those specifics, auditor's terminology I would have to this down as. So review the paragraph back, go and have a look at the past paper question. You're going to get the maximum value out of that. So, as in previous sessions, it was, we're disappointing them again. It was disappointing that candidates' descriptions of test of controls were not well explained. This again comes down to it, as you can see on the right hand side, do not use the word check. This is one of the fundamental things, especially in the advanced paper. Avoid the word check. Just get it out of your system, especially when you're referring to audit. And the external has already stated this, as you can see on the screen here. We've also got test of control wording, so inspection or some inquiry for type of procedures. Get those down. I noted it up above, but inspection and inquiry are also fundamental to passing this examination in the terminology, because if you're inspecting something and inquiring about it, well, that is more robust and assured as well. You can actually observe the inventory count. That is an acceptable way of actually inspecting for evidence there. Careful on the different types of control though here, okay? Ask yourself, how robust is that actual test of control that you're referring to? Or in simple terms, if you're the auditor, you're at the client's company and you're actually doing that audit and you're putting into practice that test of control, just think to yourself, is that really going to give me clarity, and also is it really going to be a level of inspection that is a case of I can rely upon the results of that? And if the answer to it is no, don't put it down. I put keywords on there, as you can see, as to observe, inspect, inquire. How the auditors, in other words, should perform the test of controls. Get those words into your actual answers as well. That'd be really key. And lovely enough, the actual external has again put on here test of control questions so that you can go away developing them, testing internal control deficiencies, recommendations, key controls, and test of controls. Give them a go. Past paper practice again stated as being a massive and fundamental part of your revision. Fail to do it? Whew, prepare to fail, I'm afraid, because it's highlighted again by the external examiner. We're now coming on to audit evidence, so make sure we get down that as another key area you have got to be really comfortable with. So we've got the key steps here that you need to apply. Notice again apply, and notice again I've got the 1, 2 and 3 breaking down so I can check them off as I go through. Start to apply this in your revision and you will see your marks go straight up. So what is the actual area of the syllabus? Well, we've got to describe the work. Evidence obtained by the auditor, second point on here, to meet the objectives of the audit engagement. In other words, why are we actually doing the audit? And finally on there, the application of the international standards on auditing. So the ISAs, and again, were mentioned by the auditor and the external examiner earlier above, that if you can start to apply the ISAs into your answers, be more specific on them, you are going to get marks and you get credit for them. So let's scroll it down in terms of this. So I hope you're still following in terms of the actual document as well. So see past papers for this style of question to help your technique and wording. The wording is so key. I'm going to highlight some as we go through here. And because it's just happening again and again and again, but it's describing the relevant audit procedures, transactions or events. Those are the three factors in terms of what you can look for in this type of question. And overall performance in this key syllabus area in the session was once again disappointing. Key things to get down there are the audit procedures, transactions, events. You're going to see examples of those in the past papers that you need to get familiar with. But because you know the three key areas to describe, you are already on the right track to getting better at it. We've got practice papers, again, going to be key, but what did the externals say in terms of this? So candidates must be prepared to tailor their knowledge of substantive testing to a range of balances in the financial statements. So in other words, whether that be the assets, the liabilities, the equity, the profit, the expenses, the revenue, tailoring your knowledge is being specific to what you're given. So if you don't talk about the inventory, you're not going to get many marks. If you don't talk about the current liabilities, you're not going to get many marks. In most cases, candidates remain unable to tailor their knowledge of general substantive procedures to the specific issues. So if it's going to over or understate the profit and loss, statement of comprehensive income, shall I say, or the statement of financial position, that's one of the first things. And then it's pretty much confused with the approach. Brilliant. Gosh, well, it's a case of stating to yourself, we've got loads of multiple examples that the externals given down here. You've got to be specific to what they have asked in the actual requirement. That's going to be really key. So let's pull it down a bit more. In particular, so we're going into more areas now, address the specifics of the question. Any tests provided which do not test this assertion would not have scored any marks. So, if you don't refer to the trade receivables, no marks. If you don't refer to what the actual question is referring to, no marks. If you're writing down assertions that you know that you're comfortable to talk about, but they don't relate to the actual requirement, no marks, okay? It's all going to come down to, and you've got to be specific as to, in your response, relate it back to that requirement. What are the verbs? What are the key terms? Just like where we had those little 1s and 2s and 3s, that is going to really help you, because you can see on here, they've highlighted again the textbook answer versus the specific scenario answer on here. So consider the type of balances and also the organisation. What sort of area, what sort of field, what industry are they in? For the appropriate procedures. So are they more sort of technology based? Are they more sort of people based? Do they have a lot of stock in warehouses? These are the sort of questions for substantive procedures you need to be asking yourself, again with that auditor's hat on. Income for a not-for-profit charity, testing sales, invoices and goods dispatch notes would not be valid audit procedures where charity's main source of income are donations and charity events. So yes, understanding how a charity operates and what the case is for that, okay? That's where the appropriate procedures for the appropriate business comes into it as well. You need to get really familiar on that. And again, give it a go. Review your answers, be critical on yourself, practice, practice, practice. In terms of those are really good examples highlighted by the external examiner as to where it can help you. So in addition to the actual past papers, candidates should also read the Audit and Assurance technical article, the Audit of Assertions on there. So I've given you the actual overview names in terms of it, so cover ACCA, but go and read that article. The externals even highlighted it, that they've read it. So you've got to ask yourself the question, am I going to be at an advantage or a disadvantage if I read or don't read that article on there? Well, I can tell you now, if you go and read it, you are definitely going to be at an advantage. Get some good notes down to it, and I've got the link to the ACCA's website for that in the description here. We've got on here now, as addressed in previous external examiners' reports, so oh my word, they've noted this before. Candidates must strive to understand substantive procedures. Sounds pretty easy, doesn't it? But it's got to be, again, same words used, tailored, specific as well. Sufficiently detailed, which source the actual document should be used. So referring to the particular area. Tests and activities performed by the auditor to detect possible material misstatement. So actually putting the actual figures out of what the actual financial statements could be materially misstated, and to give a false or potentially different view than what it should do for the actual stakeholders. So really key there to get down material misstatement, another key auditing word. So explaining what for example, to ensure the completeness and reasonableness of a provision, must back up your argument and points made. So yes, state the substantive procedures, but what does it actually mean? Who is it going to impact, and why it is important as well? Develop your answers to get those marks. There are many resources available on ACCA's website, past paper questions, and the style of questions. Do as many of these as possible. I'm going to save my breath, save my words. The externals mention it, I've already mentioned it. The ball is in your court. You've got to hold yourself accountable. I've put on the study with me videos on there as well, so feel free to play them, hold yourself accountable, and get them down as well. Oh, we're not done yet. There was more, and there is more. Review and reporting. So this area of the syllabus requires an understanding of how, and again, notice how I've actually broken it down, consideration of subsequent events and the going concern principle can inform the conclusions from audit work, okay? And this is a nice overview for it as to reflecting in the different types of auditor's report, written representations, and final review of the report as well. So that's, get that down as a really nice consideration of subsequent events and the going concern principle as to, is the business going to continue? What does that relate to reviewing and reporting as well, with the audit opinion, which we're going to come on to further down. So I've highlighted it down there as well. What do those financial statements mean to the external auditor? So questions in this area of the syllabus, scenario based. We came on to this in section B. Up at the top, but they're just reiterating here. So are the financial statements over or understated, and for which particular area? So describing the required amendments to the financial statements and the audit procedures as well. Going concern subsequent events. Be specific to the scenario. They can require an assessment of the impact, okay, on the auditor's report due to an unresolved accounting issue, okay? So in other words, yeah, you've provided the actual financial statements, you've gone through it as an auditor, but then there's another accounting issue that may mean that you actually need to change your audit opinion, okay? And this is where you've got to be comfortable in terms of this. So in the auditor's report, questions, candidates are often required to discuss the accounting issue. Well, okay, if we're going to be given it, you've got to talk about it. Assess whether the error is material or not. So this can relate back to your actual ratio analysis and your materiality equations and questions that you need, calculations should I say, that you've got to get down. But key thing on here, consider the type of modification. So if any, and lastly, to discuss the impact on the auditor's report, okay, big tick, we've got that down. And I've even put it on the side there. Note down this audit and assurance exam tip here, because we've got step 1 and step 2. Step 1, we've got to answer and must clearly state the opinion issued. So you've got to say, first of all, and this is where it comes down as to, is it unmodified as an opinion or modified as an opinion? That is the fundamental first step. So you're telling the external examiner, you've stated your opinion to start off with, and if the opinion is to be modified, okay, so we need to make a change to it, so it pings down onto another one then. So the type of modification opinion in which it is stated. So is it going to be qualified, adverse, or an actual disclaimer of opinion now? So candidates are advised to ensure that they are knowledgeable on modifications caused by insufficient evidence. So this comes back to those accounting transactions that could impact on what the stakeholders see in the financial accounts on this, okay? But I've put on there for you a little description as to how I would try and word it in terms of remembering them. So a qualified opinion, material and not pervasive. So it's not spreading to other areas of the actual accounts. So it is material, but it's not in various areas. However, are the financial statements materially misstated, material and pervasive? That is an adverse, okay, opinion in terms of it. So materially misstated is the key thing there for that. Or was there an inability to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence? Get that wording down. So material misstatement is an adverse opinion. Inability to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence. I just want to be careful on my wording there. That is material and pervasive, so it affects various areas. Adverse is also pervasive as well, but that is where we get a disclaimer of opinion. Think about it from an opinion point of view, that we didn't actually get enough evidence there, so how can we actually give an actual a proper opinion on the actual assessment of the audit here? So that is the disclaimer of opinion, adverse opinion, and also the qualified opinion. Whew. Still going. We've got plenty of points still to go. I record this in one go, so I hope we're finding this alright as we go through. Few more points to get down here. So provided a full discussion of the actual issue. So in order to award 1 mark for discussing the auditor, the issue that the candidates should not just rewrite the issue in the question. Oh my word. Missing out on key time and just rewriting the requirement. If you do that, you're not going to pick up on actual marks for this. So key phrase to remember to get down here, candidates need to explain the effect of the item being incorrectly recorded. So this links back to the actual opinions that we had up there in terms of not enough actual evidence being provided. So what have we got on here? You've got to refer to, again, assets, liabilities, profits, over or understating the actual financial accounts, and is it materially misstated or not. This session this session more candidates identified the issue, brilliant, okay, from the scenario, but failed to explain. In other words, you're really limiting your marks on this as well. Key technique, identify, explain, and if you need to actually go into more detail on it and if it's recommended. This is why students again fail this exam, not being detailed enough. So not necessary to show workings of how materiality was calculated, as there was only half mark available for this. Hang on, let me just come back onto that. But they failed to explain, okay, therefore gaining just half a mark. In addition, candidates should also note that it is not necessary to show the workings of how materiality was calculated, as there was only half a mark for this. So in other words, you're going to come to a figure in terms of it, but don't think by working out, getting a percentage or whatever a figure may be, you're going to be getting 2 marks for it. It's only worth half. They're more interested in how you can tell the external examiner what it means. That is the key thing. Identify, explain, impact, recommend as well. But it all comes down to those buzzwords in the actual question. So we've had modified or unmodified, so unless stated otherwise in the question required, candidates should only include the type of modification required if the company does not adjust for the issue in the financial statements. So just to repeat that, really key, get it down, only include the type of modification required if the company does not adjust for the issue in the financial statements. So from that accounting treatment we looked at above, weaker candidates continue to discuss what the report would look like. In other words, writing down a load of stuff that's going to get you no marks and waste loads of time. So just to reiterate, qualified, adverse, disclaimer of opinion. As you can see on here, don't fall into that usual audit and assurance trap of just writing, not relating to the requirements, and you know what the result of that is. 0. Spot on, but you're not going to make that mistake now. You're going to read the requirement through, understand those key buzzwords, and how we're going to apply that as well. So let's ping it on even further now as well. So the auditor's reports we're coming on to here. So matters chosen to be conveyed to those charged with governance. So governance coming in again. Key areas that could massively impact on the running of the company. So governance on here, material uncertainties, going concern, key audit matters. This is where you've got to apply that technical knowledge, how the corporate governance comes into it, and how the overall business operates effectively as well. There will be a few marks in terms of actually including this in your analysis. So referring to and state the ISAs to back up your points here. Auditors' reports are a core area of the syllabus. I mean, it's an audit and assurance examination. And, key thing on here, knowledge of the ISAs in this area are imperative. So this is where you need to get a sheet of paper, and actually as you go through past paper questions, I used to do this all the time, write down the actual ISA in terms of it. So I've got an example on the side there, ISA 240, and you start to remember, and you can apply these to scenarios that, if I saw an actual scenario that related to auditor's responsibility to fraud, I could refer down to, and then that was the little snap in my head that went, ISA 240, auditor's responsibility to fraud. Can I back it up into an identify and explain or recommendation or impact question on here as well, to make my answer stand out, make it more robust, and to help out the actual marker as well, because then they'll see that and go, James knows what he's on about. He's being really specific, tailoring it to the question as well, and demonstrating knowledge of the ISAs on there. Really key. So in addition, candidates should also read the Audit and Assurance technical article again. So they've noted it now twice. Have you read it? Are you going to read it? Do you think it will benefit if you read it? All key questions. I'll leave you to answer those. That's all right. Now, coming on to, if we haven't talked about exam technique already, nice of the external examiner to include an actual exam technique area. So we'll look on the left hand side, you've got keywords on there that I'd highly recommend you get down as to how you describe and actually refer to audit scenarios, including risk as well. So everything from self-interest to self-review. This can also relate into ethics. Also we've got errors, inherent risk, detection risk. You've seen these before, but it's just to highlight them as well. The format. Now the format on here, we'll come on to it, but we've also got, just to reiterate on there for the auditor's responses, these are some of the just keywords to avoid rather than the word check. So you've got our substantive procedures we've already talked about, audit procedures, skepticism, verify, discuss, agree, confirm, comply, inspect. These are the words that you need to incorporate in your answers as well. Take a screenshot, take a photo, pause it, whatever it may be, get them down, get them in your answers, and you're going to see your marks take off as well. So let me just pull this down as to exam technique. So good exam technique is vital for success in audit and assurance. I know, oh, I know. And I've even wrote on the side there, underrated point. I think it's been in every section so far. It was pleasing to see that most candidates made effective use of the pre-formatted response areas. So this relates to, as you can see above, the actual audit risk and audit response. So in other words, you're going to get those sort of half marks on one side for stating the audit risk, okay, identifying. What type of risk does this actually relate to? So we're coming on to the explain part here. Possible impact, over or understating, income statement, balance sheet, particular assets or a particular area. Be specific on your points there. And then on the other side, and again this is maybe a bit more computer based, but you can still do it in the written exam, avoiding the word check, so referring to those verifying words as well above. It's an increase and decrease in what? Okay, so be specific to that actual scenario and the point made. That is where the added value you're going to pick up on those extra marks, and incorporate the key terms as well. But a good one to also state is that you're looking to lower the audit risk as well from going through this auditor's response, because at the end of the day, if you're going to actually put this into play, well, you want the audit risk to decrease as a result. That is one of the fundamental things. So just scrolling down a bit more as to where are the key points on here. So provided, so it encourages answers to structure, we've got audit risk, first key area, internal control, next key area, to be structured in columns. So like I've got at the top there, an audit risk question, you can use the sort of column format, and internal control, column format as well. The external examiner is quite happy for you to do that. Really good layout. So not only does this make it easy to mark, happy days on that, it also makes it easier for candidates to review their answer, going left to right, one mark on the left hand side, another mark on the right. Covered all the relevant areas, so as we've talked about earlier on in this video, and explain clearer to see if a control recommendation has been omitted, i.e. a way of checking if you have missed anything, okay? Because it's a really good way so that you say, right, here's my first point, get it down, explain it, and the reason why impact recommendation, right? Leave a line or two, next one. Really good technique on there as well. So, coming down to on here, so we've got a specific number of issues on here. So if it says 4 reasons, give 4 reasons, such as risk and internal control questions. Most candidates attempted to identify the required number using the example technique, but it came down to time management as well, referring to the specific number. So if you only give 3, I mean, oh my word, you're really limiting your marks on there. We've got the word disappointing. Oh, you never want to hear that. But once again, it was disappointing to see some question requirements were not even attempted. So in other words, if you're missing out a 10 marker, you start off the exam saying, well, I've got 100 marks and I've got to hit 50. If you're missing out a 10 marker, you're saying to yourself, well, I've now got 90 marks to get and I've got to hit 50. Oh, that's just poor time management. You've got to be doing your past paper questions to time, and knowing when you've got to move on as well. If you haven't already, check out my video on the top tips to passing audit and assurance. It's in another video. It's got a good time management structure on there for you as well. So this tended to be about, worryingly, about knowledge areas, substantive tested questions, and lack of knowledge in exam preparation. You know the answer to that, past papers, and getting the actual time in the bank for it as well. Textbook answers, specific answers, again, really important. This is where we've got to ensure that answers relate to the scenario given. You've already heard this from me before. Too generic, clearly described how the procedure should be performed, and also adequate number of procedures provided as well. So if you've got a 5-mark question, you should have at least 5 well-described procedures to maximise that potential mark as well. Candidates should also not rewrite the question requirement at the start of each question, as this is unnecessary and not an efficient use of time. Completely agree. 0 marks, waste of time, waste of effort. What is the point? Specific to the question, as you've heard me say before. So they've nicely put on here sort of word processing techniques as well, so especially for the computer-based exam now, in terms of the length and depth of many answers, how we can significantly expand on that. While providing bullet points is acceptable, answers must be specifically detailed and not note-like in order to maximise marks. So I'd actually say if you're going to put down bullet points, that'll be a case of last 2 minutes of the exam, and you see you've got a question on there, just bullet point down key things that you think you might just be able to get a little half mark there, little half mark there. I call this sort of fishing for marks in the last 2 minutes. Where can I find that extra mark that could tip me over the edge? So this is a past issue of students not writing enough quantity or detail, but I'd only refer to bullet points in the last minute or two where you go, I've got to work up to the last minute possible, the last second possible, and that will be my last tip in terms of it. Otherwise, clearly structured, specific sentences that actually relate to the given scenario. Just think to yourself, requirement mindset in terms of it. So no automatic spelling checker tool available, or try to manage your time appropriately. So this applies to both the question-based examinations and pen and paper as well. So look out for omissions of key words, for example. The omission of a word not can completely change your answer. I completely agree in terms of that if you've missed out one little word in the sentence, that, say for example, you missed out the word over. So we were talking about, you have something stated the balance sheet. Well, if you've not said it's overstated, then that's a mark on there as well. So search for the actual ACCA student support resources on audit and assurance. There's some really good tools on there that are going to help you out. And as I said on there, there's a video introducing the main functionality of it. Check out the resources, but in terms of the actual spelling and grammar, that's going to come with past paper practice. And also when you go through your past papers, when you've actually gone through them to time, done your answer top to bottom, go into it as if you were the external examiner. Get a red pen out, be really critical on your work and say to yourself, am I being specific enough? Does it make sense? And have I referred back to the actual scenario enough? So we've got on here the actual guidance and learning support resources to help you succeed in your exam. So you've actually got on there loads of resources on the ACCA's website. Check them out. And as I said before, I've got a how to pass the exam video too, completely free. If you subscribe to the channel, you get access to all of them and all of my new videos as well. Plus, you learn from other people, from their experiences where they went wrong, hence the point of this video, in terms of all the other key things to get down. Now, what else we got on here? So very useful and can be tested. We've talked about the technical articles. Make sure you go and read that one that the externals mentioned twice in this report. That is going to be really key. We've got additional external examiners reports. So this is actually relating to, well, what has come up this year, what has come up last year. Keep reading them through. There will be the same areas that overlap as well. Valuable tool to understanding the exam, common pitfalls, well, we've been through quite a lot today, and developing that exam technique. But that is just going to come with you sat down, doing them to time, and getting actually in that working environment to do it. I can't force you to sit down and do the past papers. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea and it's not the thing that most people enjoy, but trust me, the added value of sitting down, doing it to time is going to make a massive difference for you on here. Critical resources on there. I've highlighted on there for you the resource of the examiner's approach, a guide to using the examiner's report. Well, I've taken you through it top to bottom with my experience here, so if you have enjoyed today's video, be sure to give it a like. Let me know what you thought of it in the description below. A guide to reflection into your retaking exam. Brilliant, make the most of it as well. That'll be from other students who have failed previously, but again, I've covered you on this. There's another video on my channel to go through if you are retaking this exam. 5 key areas, short and sweet as to, will really help you out. And then actually providing you with further pointers as well on it. So what have we got in terms of here? It is essential to practice as many exam standard questions as you can. Fundamental. Absolutely fundamental. You cannot do enough. This is critical as audit and assurance, as is 70% of the marks are written as well. So exam technique is absolutely critical. The past papers are online, and also you've got the exam library. You've got the exam library on there as well for you to actually refer to. Whew. And that is how you analyse an audit and assurance external examiner's report top to bottom. So let's head back onto the main screen. Hope you've enjoyed that, but a few more points to discuss. 3, 2, 1, and breathe. What about that? Those are the notes, those are the actual insights that I really wish I'd have had when I was doing the audit and assurance examination. So Martin, Savin, Ray, other ACCA students watching this video around the world who follow me on Instagram or who are actually subscribed to my channel, I really hope those tips help you out. And also, if you're actually doing the advanced audit and assurance paper, that will be a really helpful video just to get that knowledge flowing again when you're going to sit it. If you have enjoyed today's video, give it a massive thumbs up below. Put any queries in the description as to other questions or other videos you'd like me to cover. I answer absolutely every single one of them, and it's great to hear that it's going to help you out. Let me know how you get on with the exam. That would be absolutely super. The only final thing is, it's a case of, I'm going to have a sit down now. I really hope you've enjoyed that video, and a massive best of luck with the upcoming examinations. All the details are in the description below as to other resources that I would absolutely recommend. So, good luck with it. Keep up the studying work, and as always on that bombshell, I'll see you next time. Cheers!